What if I told you that in the year 1347, deep within the forests of medieval England, a knight discovered something that would shatter everything he believed about God, heaven, and the very nature of divine truth? What if this discovery was so profound, so dangerous, that it had to be hidden from the world for centuries? Today, I'm going to share with you a tale that has been whispered through forbidden manuscripts, passed down through secret bloodlines, and guarded by those who understood that some truths are too powerful for the unprepared mind. This is not history as you know it. This is not doctrine as the Church teaches it. This is a legend, a parable that challenges us to question everything we think we know about the divine. Prepare yourself for a revelation that will chill your soul and ignite your spirit. Prepare yourself for the story of Sir Aldrich the Broken and the celestial being who changed everything. But before we begin this journey into the forbidden archives of human memory, I need you to do something. If you're ready to have your understanding of faith, divinity, and cosmic truth turned completely upside down, hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone you trust, someone who, like you, is ready to question and wonder. Now, let us travel back to a time when the world was smaller, when the veil between dimensions was thinner, and when a single encounter could transform a man's soul forever. The year was 1347. The Black Death ravaged Europe like a divine judgment, claiming nearly half the population. Villages lay abandoned, their streets littered with the corpses of those who had prayed desperately to a God who seemed to have turned his face away from humanity. It was a time when faith itself was dying alongside the faithful. In the Kingdom of England, amidst the rolling hills of what we now call Yorkshire, there lived a knight whose very name had become synonymous with sorrow. Sir Aldrich de Montfort, known throughout the land as Aldrich the Broken, had once been the pride of King Edward's court. Tall and powerful, with eyes the color of storm clouds and a sword arm that had never known defeat, he had been everything a medieval knight should be: brave, honorable, and devoutly faithful.
But that was before the siege of Calais. That was before he watched his younger brother Thomas die in his arms, calling out for their mother as French arrows pierced his chest. That was before Aldrich knelt in that blood-soaked field and screamed his rage at heaven, demanding answers from a God who remained silent. The plague had taken his wife, Margaret, while he was away at war. His children, sweet little Eleanor and brave young William, had succumbed to the pestilence before he could return to hold them one final time. His castle now stood empty except for a handful of loyal servants who looked at his lord with eyes full of pity and fear. For Sir Aldrich the Broken no longer believed. Oh, he still attended Mass. He still knelt at the altar and mouthed the words of prayer. But inside, his soul was a wasteland. He had seen too much death, too much suffering, too much evidence that if God existed at all, he was either powerless or cruel beyond measure. On this particular October evening, As autumn painted the forests in shades of blood and gold, Sir Aldrich rode alone through the thornwood, a dense forest that local peasants avoided after dark, claiming it was haunted by the spirits of plague victims. He preferred the company of ghosts to the living these days. At least the dead no longer pretended to have answers. His destrier's hoofs crunched through fallen leaves as he made his way along an ancient hunting trail. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of wood smoke from distant villages. Above him, the first stars were beginning to appear in a sky that seemed vast and empty and indifferent to human suffering. Aldrich was thinking of Margaret, of the way she used to laugh when he returned from tournaments, her face bright with joy and relief, when the forest exploded in light. The brilliance was unlike anything Sir Aldrich had ever witnessed. Not the warm orange glow of fire, nor the clean white radiance of lightning, but something entirely otherworldly, a light that seemed to contain every color that had ever existed, while somehow remaining pure and silver. It streaked across the sky like a falling star, but larger, brighter, and moving with purpose rather than the random trajectory of celestial debris. The light illuminated the entire forest, casting shadows that danced and writhed among the trees like living things.
Aldrich's horse reared in terror, nearly throwing him from the saddle. The animal's eyes rolled white with panic as it fought against the reins, desperate to flee. But the knight held firm, his warrior instincts overriding his shock. In the distance, perhaps half a mile deeper into the thornwood, he could see where the mysterious light had descended, a golden glow that pulsed like a heartbeat among the ancient oaks. For a long moment, he sat motionless, his mind struggling to process what he had witnessed. A falling star? Some kind of divine sign? Or perhaps his grief-addled brain was finally succumbing to madness. But then he heard it, a sound unlike anything in his experience, not quite a cry for help, not quite music, but something that bypassed his ears entirely and resonated directly in his chest, in his bones, in the deepest chambers of his heart. It was a sound of pain, of desperate longing, of someone or something calling out across an impossible distance. Every rational instinct told him to turn his horse around and ride back to his castle. Whatever lay in those woods was beyond human understanding, and he had suffered enough supernatural torment for one lifetime. But something else stirred within him, something he had thought dead since Margaret's funeral. Compassion. Against his better judgment, Sir Aldrich spurred his destrier toward the light. The deeper he rode into the thornwood, the stranger the world became. The very air seemed to shimmer with an unworldly energy that made his skin tingle and his hair stand on end. A great white stag, a creature of legend that no hunter had ever managed to kill, stepped onto the path ahead of him. It regarded the knight with ancient, knowing eyes before turning and walking slowly in the direction of the light, as if leading him forward. Time itself seemed distorted. Minutes felt like hours, yet when Aldrich finally reached his destination, it seemed as though he had traveled there in the blink of an eye.
And from within this impossible vessel came that sound again, that wordless cry that spoke directly to his soul. Someone was trapped inside. Someone was dying. Sir Aldrich dismounted slowly, his hand instinctively moving to his sword hilt, though he realized with grim humor that steel would be useless against whatever forces had created this scene. The fused glass beneath his boots was still warm, and the air shimmered with residual energy that made his teeth ache. As he approached the mysterious vessel, the symbols on its surface began to pulse with increasing urgency. The wordless cry became more desperate, more pleading, and then, with a sound like silver bells chiming in harmony, the surface of the vessel began to dissolve. What emerged was simultaneously the most beautiful and most alien thing Aldrich had ever beheld. The being was tall, nearly 7 feet, and impossibly slender, with limbs that seemed too delicate to support its frame. Its skin was translucent, reviewing a network of light that flowed beneath like luminous blood. It had a vaguely humanoid shape, but elongated, refined, as if someone had taken the human form and perfected it according to divine mathematics. Its face was narrow and angular, with large eyes that held depths Aldrich could not fathom, eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies, swirling with colors that had no names in any earthly language. When it looked at him, Aldrich felt as though he was being seen completely, down to his very essence, with a compassion so profound it nearly brought him to his knees. The being was injured. One of its long, graceful arms hung at an unnatural angle, and the light beneath its skin flickered weakly in several places like candles guttering in the wind. When it tried to stand, it collapsed immediately, its legs unable to support its weight. For a heartbeat, night and celestial being regarded each other across an impossible gulf of difference. Then the creature's lips moved, and though no sound emerged, Aldrich heard its voice as clearly as if it had spoken aloud. Heard it not with his ears, but with some deeper faculty he had never known he possessed. Warrior of earth, the voice was like music made from starlight. I am far from home, broken like the fragments of a shattered star. Your kind calls you night, protector of the weak. Will you extend that protection to one who has fallen from the very heavens?
Aldrich's throat was dry as desert sand. What are you? The being's eyes seemed to smile, though its expression remained grave. I am what your people might call an angel, though that word carries too much weight of your earthly understanding. I am a traveler between worlds, a student of the divine light that flows through all creation. And I am dying The word escaped Aldrich's lips as barely more than a whisper. My vessel was damaged in the crossing between dimensions. The energy that sustains my physical form bleeds away like water from a cracked chalice. Without aid, I will fade from this existence within hours. Sir Aldrich de Montfort stared down at the creature, this self-proclaimed angel, and felt his world tilting on its axis. Every lesson he had learned at his mother's knee, every sermon he had heard in countless cathedrals, every prayer he had offered to an absent God suddenly seemed like the babblings of a child trying to understand the movements of the stars. "How?" he asked simply. "Shelter, safety, time to heal. But more than that, belief. Faith has power, Sir Aldrich de Montfort. Your faith specifically." The knight recoiled. "My faith? I have no faith left. God took everything from me and gave nothing in return." The being's great eyes filled with something that might have been sorrow. "Do you think I would have fallen here, in this place, at this moment, if that were truly so? Help me, Sir Knight, and I will share with you truths that will transform not just your understanding of faith, but your comprehension of the very nature of existence itself. Truths about the one you call Jesus, truths about heaven, truths about the divine mystery you name God." Aldrich felt his heart hammering against his ribs. This was madness. This was heresy. This was exactly the sort of devilish temptation the priests warned against. But the being radiated no evil, no malevolence. If anything, the presence he felt was one of infinite love and profound sadness. The sadness of one who carried knowledge too vast for mortal minds to easily comprehend. "I know your fears, Sir Aldrich de Montfort. I know the teachings that war against belief in what you are seeing. But tell me, when you look at me, when you truly look with not just your eyes but your heart, what do you perceive?"
The knight looked, and what he saw nearly broke him anew. He saw suffering, yes, but suffering born with dignity and grace. He saw wisdom that spanned eons and love that encompassed worlds. He saw something that was unmistakably divine, but not in the way he had been taught to expect divinity. "I see," he struggled for words. "I see someone in need." "Then you see truly. Will you help me?" Sir Aldrich the Broken, who had lost faith in God and man alike, found himself nodding. Perhaps it was compassion. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was simply the desperate hope that in this impossible encounter he might find some meaning in a world gone mad with suffering. "Yes," he said simply. "Yes, I will help you." Sir Aldrich's castle, Ravenshollow, had once been a place of laughter and light. Now it stood like a monument to grief, its great halls empty save for echoes and memories. The knight had dismissed most of his servants years ago, unable to bear their pitying looks and gentle ministrations. Only old Geoffrey remained, his master-at-arms who had served the de Montfort family for 40 years and refused to abandon his lord even in the depths of despair. It was Geoffrey who helped Aldrich carry the wounded being into the castle's highest tower, a circular chamber that had once been Margaret's solar, the place where she had sown and sung and gazed out over their lands with contentment in her eyes. Now it would serve as a sanctuary for something that defied every natural law Geoffrey had ever known. To his credit, the old soldier asked no questions. He simply followed orders, bringing fresh linens and water and whatever healing herbs could be found in the castle's overgrown gardens. When the beings settled on to the makeshift bed they had prepared, the light beneath its translucent skin pulsed weakly, like a flame struggling against a harsh wind. "Your loyalty runs deep in this one," the being observed, its voice still speaking directly to Aldrich's mind as Geoffrey left them alone. "Such devotion is rare in any world." "Geoffrey has been with my family since before I was born," Aldrich replied, settling into a chair beside the bed. "He stayed even after—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "After your loss. Yes, I feel the echoes of that pain in your soul, Sir Knight. The death of loved ones leaves wounds that time alone cannot heal."
Aldrich's jaw tightened. "If you truly are what you claim to be, some kind of divine messenger, then you should know why I struggle with faith. Where was God when my children suffered? Where was divine love when Margaret called out for relief that never came?" The being was quiet for a long moment, its galaxy-filled eyes studying the knight's face. When it finally spoke, its mental voice carried a weight that seemed to press against Aldrich's very soul. "What if I told you that your understanding of God, the understanding taught by your priests and written in your holy books, is like a child's drawing of the sun? Recognizable, perhaps, but missing the true power, the true glory, the true nature of what it attempts to describe. I would say that sounds like blasphemy. And I would say that truth often does to those who have been taught to fear it." The being's expression was patient, almost paternal. "Your Jesus, the one whose name you invoke in prayer and whose symbol you wear around your neck, did he not speak in parables? Did he not teach that the kingdom of heaven was not a distant place, but something that could be found within?" Aldrich frowned. "The priests say heaven is our reward for faithful service, a place we go after death if we have lived righteously." "And what if they are wrong? What if Jesus tried to tell your ancestors something far more profound, far more immediate, but the message became corrupted over time, altered by those who found it easier to control people through fear and distant promises than to empower them with present truth?" The knight felt a strange stirring in his chest, part fear, part excitement, part desperate hope. "What are you saying?" The being struggled to sit up straighter, wincing as the movement sent ripples of disrupted light through its form. "I am saying that the divine consciousness you call God is not separate from creation, sitting in judgment from some distant throne. I am saying that the love Jesus spoke of is not mere emotion, but the fundamental force that binds all existence together. And I am saying that the kingdom of heaven he promised is not a place you go to when you die, but a state of awareness you can experience right now, in this moment, in this very room." Aldrich's breath caught in his throat. "That's impossible." "Is it? When you held your children in your arms, when you looked into your wife's eyes and felt that overwhelming surge of love, did you not experience something that transcended the purely physical? Did you not touch, for just a moment, something infinite?" Tears began to flow down the knight's weathered cheeks. "Yes," he whispered, "but it was taken from me."
Was it? Or did you simply lose the ability to perceive it? The love you felt for your family, that was a taste of the divine consciousness that permeates everything. When they died, their bodies returned to the earth, but that love, that consciousness, that essential spark of who they truly were, that is eternal. That is what your Jesus meant when he spoke of everlasting life. "But the suffering," Aldrich's voice broke. "How can a loving God allow such pain?" The being's eyes filled with infinite compassion. "Because consciousness requires choice, Sir Knight. True love cannot exist without the freedom to choose otherwise. Your world exists in a state of learning, of growth, of becoming. Suffering is not punishment. It is the friction that polishes the soul. And every act of love, every moment of compassion, every choice to help rather than harm, moves the entire universe closer to its destiny, which is perfect unity, complete awareness, the full realization of what your mystics glimpse in their deepest meditations and your poets grasp in their most inspired moments, that all consciousness is one consciousness, experiencing itself subjectively through countless individual points of awareness." Aldrich sat in stunned silence, his mind reeling. Everything he had been taught, everything he had believed about the nature of existence suddenly seemed like pieces of a puzzle he had been trying to assemble without seeing the complete picture. "If what you're saying is true," he said slowly, "then why doesn't everyone know this? Why do the churches teach differently?" "Because power corrupts, Sir Knight. It is easier to control people by making them dependent on external authority than to teach them that the divine spark already exists within their own hearts. Your Jesus was killed not for claiming to be the Son of God, but for teaching that all human beings are children of the divine, that the same consciousness that flowed through him flows through every person who has ever lived." "The Inquisition would burn me alive if I even heard such words," Aldrich whispered. "Yes, they would, just as they have burned thousands of others who glimpsed this truth. But ask yourself, does the fear of earthly punishment outweigh the possibility of experiencing the divine reality that already exists within you?" The knight looked out through the narrow window at the star-filled sky. Somewhere in that vast expanse, beyond the reach of human understanding, forces moved that made earthly concerns seem small indeed. And yet, if this strange being spoke truly, those same cosmic forces flowed through his own heart, his own consciousness, his own capacity for love. "How?" he asked simply. "How do I experience what you're describing?"
First, you must heal the wound in your own soul. You must forgive, not just others, but yourself. And most difficult of all, you must forgive God for being something other than what you expected. That night, Sir Aldrich knelt alone in the castle's chapel, a small stone chamber where generations of his family had prayed, and where he had married Margaret on a golden summer morning that seemed like a lifetime ago. The familiar scents of old incense and beeswax candles filled his nostrils, but instead of comfort, they brought only confusion. Before him stood a wooden crucifix, carved by some unknown artisan centuries ago. The figure of Christ hung there in eternal agony. Eyes turned skyward in supplication would despair. For years, Aldrich had found solace in that image, the God who suffered as he suffered, who understood pain and loss and abandonment. But now, after his conversation with the being in the tower, the crucifix looked different. Where once he had seen divine suffering, now he wondered if he was looking at the deliberate distortion of a far greater truth. Had Jesus truly come to die in agony, or had he come to teach humanity that death was an illusion, suffering was temporary, and the divine consciousness was eternal? "I don't know what to believe anymore," he whispered to the empty chapel. "I don't know if you're even listening." The silence stretched on, broken only by the distant sound of wind through the castle's ancient stones. No voice from heaven answered his prayer. No sign manifested to guide his path. There was only the weight of his own doubt, pressing down on his soul like a physical burden. Was the being in his tower truly divine, or was it some demon sent to test his faith? The priests had always warned that Satan was subtle, that he came not as a monster, but as an angel of light, speaking half-truths designed to lead the faithful astray. How could a simple knight distinguish between divine revelation and diabolical deception? Aldrich thought of his children, of their innocent faces and trusting hearts. What would little Eleanor think if she knew her father was harboring something that might be the enemy of everything she had been taught to hold sacred? What would young William say if he learned that his father was entertaining blasphemies that could damn both their souls to eternal fire? "Show me," he pleaded, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "If you truly exist, if you truly care, show me what I should do."
But heaven remained silent, and the crucifix hung motionless in the candlelight. Rising from his knees, Sir Aldrich walked slowly back through the castle's corridors, his footsteps hollow on the worn stones. At the base of the tower stairs, he hesitated. Every rational instinct told him to turn away, to send a being back to whatever realm it had come from, to return to the familiar darkness of his faithless existence, rather than risk the unknown territories of heretical belief. But something drew him upward, the same inexplicable compulsion that had led him into the thornwood in the first place. He found the being exactly as he had left it, lying still on the makeshift bed. Its inner light now so dim it was barely visible. At Aldrich's approach, those infinite eyes opened and regarded him with patient understanding. "You are troubled, Sir Knight. I am damned, either for listening to you or for doubting what might be divine truth. Either way, my soul is forfeit." "Do you truly believe that? Do you think the source of all love and compassion would damn any soul for seeking truth with an honest heart?" "I don't know what I believe anymore. That's the problem." Aldrich slumped into the chair beside the bed. "How do I know you're not a demon sent to corrupt my faith?" The being was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke, its mental voice was gentler than ever before. "You are right to be cautious, Sir Knight. Discernment is wisdom. But tell me, since I have been in your castle, have you felt closer to love or further from it? Have your thoughts turned toward compassion or towards cruelty? Has my presence inspired you to acts of service or acts of selfishness?" Aldrich considered the question honestly. Since encountering the being, he had felt something stirring in his heart that he had thought dead forever, a sense of purpose, of connection, of hope that perhaps existence held more meaning than endless suffering. "Closer to love," he admitted reluctantly. "Then you have your answer. As your Jesus taught, by their fruits ye shall know them. No creature of darkness could inspire the light I see growing in your eyes, Sir Knight. No demonic presence could kindle the compassion I feel awakening in your heart. But the priests are human, struggling with the same fears and limitations as all conscious beings. Some seek truth sincerely. Others have allowed power and authority to corrupt their understanding. But the divine reality I speak of transcends all earthly institutions. It is written in the very fabric of your soul." Aldrich leaned forward, his face haggard with exhaustion and inner turmoil. "I want to believe you. God help me, I want to believe that there's more to existence than the emptiness I've been living with. But how can I know for certain?" The being studied him with those galaxy-deep eyes. "Would it help if I showed you?" "Showed me what?" "A glimpse of the reality I speak of, a direct experience of the divine consciousness that flows through all things. But I must warn you, once seen, it cannot be unseen. Once known, it cannot be unknown. Your old understanding of faith will be forever changed." Sir Aldrich's heart pounded against his ribs. This was the moment of ultimate choice, the decision that would either lead to enlightenment or damnation, salvation or heresy. In the depths of his being, he could feel the old Aldrich, the faithful knight who had never questioned his beliefs, screaming warnings against this path. But he could also feel something else, a deeper voice that whispered of truths more profound than any earthly doctrine, of love more encompassing than any human teaching, of a God more magnificent than any cathedral could contain. "Show me," he whispered.
The being's form began to glow more brightly, the network of light beneath its translucent skin pulsing with renewed vigor. It struggled to sit up, then extended one long, graceful hand toward Sir Aldrich. "Give me your hand, Sir Knight. Open your heart and prepare yourself for a journey beyond the boundaries of ordinary perception." Aldrich hesitated for only a moment before placing his weathered palm against the being's luminous skin. The contact was electric, not painful, but overwhelmingly intense, like touching liquid starlight. The world dissolved. Suddenly, Sir Aldrich was no longer in the tower chamber. He was everywhere and nowhere, floating in a realm of pure consciousness where space and time held no meaning. Around him, or perhaps through him, flowed rivers of light that he somehow understood were the thoughts and dreams and prayers of every living being that had ever existed.
He saw the earth from an impossible distance, but not as a physical sphere, rather as a web of interconnected consciousness, with golden threads linking every human soul to every other. The threads pulsed with emotional resonance: love, fear, joy, grief, hope, despair, all flowing together in a vast tapestry of shared experience. And there, at the center of it all, was a presence so magnificent, so overwhelmingly loving, that Aldrich would have wept if he had possessed physical eyes. This was not the stern judge of church doctrine, not the distant potentate who demanded worship from his heavenly throne. This was pure consciousness, pure love, pure creative force, the source from which all existence flowed and to which it would eventually return. But more than that, he could feel this divine presence not as something external, but as the very core of his own being. It was as if he had been searching for God in the distant heavens while carrying the divine spark within his own heart all along. "This is what your Jesus tried to teach." The being's voice came from everywhere at once. "The kingdom of heaven is within you. You are not separate from the divine. You are an expression of it, experiencing itself subjectively through your individual consciousness." Aldrich watched in wonder as scenes played out before him like living tapestries. He saw Jesus not as the suffering figure of theological doctrine, but as a teacher trying desperately to communicate this very truth to minds limited by earthly understanding. He saw the early Christians filled with the direct experience of divine consciousness before the message became codified into rigid dogma. But then the visions grew darker. He saw councils of powerful men deciding what would and would not be included in Scripture, discarding texts that spoke too clearly of the divine potential within every human soul. He saw the Inquisition burning not just heretics, but mystics who had touched the same transcendent reality he was experiencing now. Power corrupts, Sir Aldrich, always. The truth your Jesus taught was too dangerous for those who wished to control others through fear and dependence, so they buried it beneath layers of doctrine and ritual until the original message was nearly lost. But not completely lost, Aldrich found himself saying, his voice somehow audible in this realm beyond physical sound. No, not completely. In every age there are those who rediscover it. mystics and saints, poets and madmen, simple peasants and learned scholars, all connected by the common thread of direct experience. They are the true keepers of the flame. The being showed him more, visions of the future, of a time when humanity would rediscover these truths on a massive scale, when the artificial divisions between religions would dissolve in the face of universal spiritual experience. But he also saw the resistance such knowledge would face, the fear and anger of those who had built their power on humanity's spiritual dependence. "Why show me this?" Aldrich asked. "Why reveal these truths to a broken knight in a forgotten castle?" "Because consciousness works through individual souls, Sir Knight. Every person who awakens to their divine nature becomes a beacon for others. Your awakening will touch other lives, which will touch others in turn, creating ripples that will spread across centuries. But I am no one special. I have no followers, no influence, no power to change the world. You have the most powerful force in the universe, Sir Aldrich. You have love. Not the sentimental emotion your poets sing about, but the fundamental creative principle that holds all existence together. When you learn to express that love consciously, deliberately, with full awareness of its divine source, there is nothing you cannot accomplish. The visions began to fade, and Aldrich found himself slowly returning to ordinary awareness. But the truth he had experienced remained, burned into his consciousness like a brand that could never be removed. He was back in the tower chamber, his hand still resting against the being's luminous skin. But everything had changed. The world looked the same, yet somehow more vivid, more alive, more infused with meaning and purpose. "I understand now," he whispered, and for the first time in years, his voice carried no trace of bitterness or despair. The being smiled, the first expression of pure joy Aldrich had seen cross its ethereal features. "Now you begin to understand, Sir Knight. The journey toward full awakening is long, perhaps spanning many lifetimes, but you have taken the first step, and that step changes everything." Aldrich looked down at his own hands, expecting to see them somehow transformed by the divine fire that now burned within his heart. They looked the same, scarred from countless battles, marked by years of earthly existence. Yet he could feel the light flowing through them, the same light that flowed through all things. "What do I do now? How do I live with this knowledge?" You live it, Sir Aldrich. You become an expression of the divine love you have experienced. You serve not out of duty or fear, but from the overflow of consciousness recognizing itself in all beings. "And what of you? Are you healed now?" The being sat up slowly, its form now glowing with restored vitality. "Your faith, your direct knowing, has indeed accelerated my healing. But my time in this realm is ending. I must continue my journey." "Where will you go?"
to other worlds, other dimensions, other beings who are ready to remember their divine nature. The universe is vast, Sir Knight, and filled with countless forms of consciousness, all seeking to return to their source. Aldrich felt a pang of loss at the thought of the being's departure, but also a deep peace. The truth he had experienced could never be taken from him, regardless of what earthly trials might lie ahead. Before you leave, I must ask, will I see Margaret and my children again? Are they still... Consciousness cannot be destroyed, Sir Aldrich. The love that connected you to your family is eternal, transcending physical death. In your awakened state, you may even find ways to touch that connection while still in earthly form. And when your own time comes to lay down this physical vessel, you will be reunited with them in fuller awareness than ever before. Tears flowed freely down the knight's face now, but they were tears of relief and gratitude rather than grief. The being departed 3 nights later, not in another blaze of otherworldly light, but simply by fading like morning mist touched by the first rays of dawn. One moment it was there, offering final words of wisdom and encouragement, and the next moment Sir Aldrich stood alone in the tower chamber, holding only the memory of the most profound encounter of his life. But he was no longer alone, not truly. The divine consciousness he had experienced remained with him, flowing through his thoughts and actions like an underground river that fed every aspect of his existence. The world that seemed empty and meaningless just days before now pulsed with purpose and possibility. Old Geoffrey was the first to notice the change in his lord. The grizzled soldier had served the de Montfort family long enough to recognize the signs of profound transformation, although he could never have imagined the true cause.
"Begging your pardon, my lord," Geoffrey said one morning as he helped Aldrich don his armor, "but you seem different, more like your old self, if you don't mind my saying." Aldrich smiled, a real smile, the first Geoffrey had seen in years. "Not my old self, Geoffrey. Something new entirely." That day, Sir Aldrich rode out from Ravenshollow for the first time since his return from France, but he was no longer seeking solitude or wallowing in grief. Instead, he rode toward the village of Millhaven, where reports had reached him of plague victims left unburied, and families starving because their providers had succumbed to the pestilence. When the villagers saw the notorious Aldrich the Broken approaching, many fled in fear. His reputation for bitter rage and explosive temper had preceded him, but what they encountered instead was a man transformed. Someone who dismounted from his destrier and knelt beside a dying child without concern for contagion. Someone who used his own cloak to cover the body of a plague victim with dignity and respect. "My lord," whispered Father Benedict, the village priest, "you shouldn't. The sickness." "We are all connected, Father," Aldrich replied, gently closing the eyes of an elderly woman who had died alone in her hovel. "Her suffering is my suffering. Her pain is my pain, and her peace is my peace as well." The priest stared at him in bewilderment. This was not the language of orthodox theology, yet there was something in the knight's manner, a profound serenity combined with active compassion that spoke of genuine holiness.
Over the following weeks, Sir Aldrich became a different kind of legend in the surrounding countryside. Where once he had been known for his skill with sword and lance, now he was spoken of as a healer, a comforter of the afflicted, a man who could look into the eyes of the dying and somehow ease their passage to whatever lay beyond. He established a hospice within Ravenshollow's walls, opening his castle to anyone who suffered, not just from plague, but from poverty, loneliness, despair. Old Geoffrey grumbled about the expense and the security risks, but he could not argue with the transformation he witnessed in his lord. "It's like you found God again, my lord," the old soldier observed one evening as they watched over a hall full of recuperating patients. "No, Geoffrey," Aldrich replied thoughtfully. "I've discovered that God was never lost. He was simply hiding in the last place I thought to look." "And where was that, my lord?"
"In here." Aldrich touched his chest over his heart. "And in there." He nodded toward the people they were caring for. "And everywhere I had been blind to see." But Sir Aldrich's transformation went deeper than mere charitable works. In quiet moments, often in the pre-dawn hours when the castle slept, he would retreat to Margaret's old solar, the chamber where the being had recuperated, and enter into a state of profound meditation. These were not the rote prayers of his former religious practice, but direct communion with the divine consciousness he had experienced. During these sessions, he sometimes felt Margaret's presence, so clearly it was as if she stood beside him. Not as a ghost or spirit in the traditional sense, but as a manifestation of the love that had connected them. Love that existed beyond physical death, beyond temporal separation. "I understand now," he would whisper into the darkness. "I understand why you had to go, why the children had to go. This physical existence is just one movement in a vast symphony. The love we shared, that continues, it always continues." And sometimes, in response, he would feel what he could only describe as Margaret's laughter, not bitter or mocking, but filled with joy at his awakening, his discovery of truths she had perhaps glimpsed in her final moments. Word of Sir Aldrich's unusual activities eventually reached the ears of church authorities. Brother Matthias, an inquisitor from York, arrived at Ravenshollow on a cold December morning with orders to investigate reports of heterodox beliefs and practices. He found a castle filled with the sick and poor, all being tended with extraordinary compassion. He found a knight who spoke of God with reverence and love, but also with a familiarity that bordered on the mystical. Most disturbing of all, he found several of Aldrich's patients claiming miraculous healings, not just physical cures, but spiritual transformations that seemed to echo the knight's own experience. "Sir Aldrich," Brother Matthias said during their formal interview, "I have heard reports that you preach unorthodox doctrines, that you claim direct communication with divine forces. I preach nothing, brother. I simply try to live according to the love I have experienced. If that appears unorthodox to you, perhaps the orthodoxy needs examination." The inquisitor's eyes narrowed. "You speak as if you have personal knowledge of God's will. That borders dangerously on the sin of pride. Does it? Or does humility sometimes look like pride to those who have forgotten what authentic spiritual experience feels like?"
Explain yourself." Sir Aldrich was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. He had no desire to be burned as a heretic, but neither could he deny the truth that had transformed his existence. "Brother Matthias, when you pray, what do you experience?" The inquisitor frowned. I perform the prescribed rituals. I recite the appropriate words. I offer proper devotion." "But do you feel anything? Do you experience any sense of connection, of response, of presence?" "Faith does not require feelings, Sir Knight. Faith requires obedience." Does it? Or have we perhaps confused obedience to human authority with genuine spiritual surrender? The inquisitor's face darkened. "You walk very close to heresy, Sir Aldrich." "I walk very close to truth, Brother Matthias, and sometimes they appear to be the same thing." The investigation continued for several days, with Brother Matthias interviewing patients, servants, and local villagers about Aldrich's teachings and practices. But what he found consistently confounded his expectations. Yes, the knight spoke of divine truths in ways that didn't perfectly align with church doctrine, but his life had become a living embodiment of Christian charity. His works were indisputably good. His influence on others seemed to inspire greater love, not less. Most troubling of all, several people claimed that simply being in Sir Aldrich's presence had somehow healed their spiritual wounds, had given them direct experiences of divine love that transcended anything they had found in traditional religious observance. On his final night at Ravenshallow, Brother Matthias found himself drawn to the castle's chapel. He entered to find Sir Aldrich kneeling before the altar, but not in the desperate pleading posture the inquisitor was accustomed to seeing. Instead, the knight knelt in perfect stillness, his face radiant with an inner peace that seemed to illuminate the entire chamber. "Sir Aldrich," the inquisitor whispered. "Brother Matthias, could you not sleep? I find myself troubled by what I have witnessed here." "How so?"
You clearly hold beliefs that deviate from accepted doctrine, yet your life displays more genuine Christian virtue than most priests I know. How am I to reconcile this contradiction?
Aldrich rose slowly and faced the inquisitor. Perhaps there is no contradiction, brother. Perhaps doctrine and truth are not always identical. That is precisely the type of statement that should see you condemned. And yet, you hesitate. Why? Because in your presence, I feel something I have not experienced in years of religious study and practice. I feel connected to something greater than myself. Then you understand. But the church is made up of human beings, Brother Matthias. Human beings who are doing their best to understand and transmit divine truth, but who are limited by their own consciousness, their own fears, their own need for control and certainty. Are you saying the church is wrong? I am saying the church is incomplete. The institutions and doctrines serve a purpose, but they are not the ultimate reality. They are fingers pointing at the moon, not the moon itself. The inquisitor fell silent, his internal struggle evident on his face. Finally, he spoke, in a voice barely above a whisper. "What should I report to my superiors?" "Report the truth, brother. Report that you found a knight who serves God through service to his fellow beings. Report that his influence inspires greater love, not less. Report that his life embodies the teachings of Christ, even if his understanding transcends traditional formulations. And if they ask about the unorthodox elements," Aldrich smiled gently, "then ask them this: if a tree produces good fruit consistently, by what authority do we call it diseased?"
The knight continued his work for another 15 years, transforming not just his own lands, but influencing a network of nobles, priests, and common folk who had encountered the divine love flowing through him. He never spoke directly of his encounter with the celestial being, but he found subtle ways to plant seeds of awakening in receptive minds. Some of these seeds fell on fertile ground. A young monk named Brother Thomas began experiencing direct mystical visions after spending time at Ravenshallow. A merchant's daughter named Catherine started a healing ministry that spread across 3 counties. A former soldier established a sanctuary for war orphans, claiming he had been inspired by divine love made manifest in human form. Each of these individuals, in turn, touched other lives, creating an expanding network of awakened consciousness that operated beneath the radar of official church scrutiny. They learned to speak carefully, to use traditional language when possible, but they never forgot the fundamental truth Sir Aldrich had helped them discover: that the divine was not distant, but present, not judgmental, but loving, not separate, but intimately connected to their own deepest nature. Sir Aldrich himself lived to the age of 67, dying peacefully in his sleep on a spring morning in 1362. Those who attended his deathbed reported that his final words were not prayers for forgiveness or mercy, but expressions of gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you for letting me remember. Thank you for letting me serve. Thank you for the love that never dies." But his true legacy lived on in the lives he had touched, the consciousness he had awakened, the seeds of divine remembrance he had planted in countless hearts. In the years following his death, several manuscript copies appeared throughout England, anonymous writings that seemed to capture the essence of his teachings without explicitly naming their source. These texts spoke of the kingdom of heaven as a present reality, of Jesus as a teacher of humanity's divine potential, of God as the living consciousness that flowed through all existence. They were passed hand to hand among those ready to receive such truths, always carefully, always with the understanding that such knowledge carried both great power and great risk.
One such manuscript found its way to a young scholar at Oxford named John Wycliffe, who would later challenge church authority in ways that anticipated the Protestant Reformation. Another influenced a mystic named Julian of Norwich, whose visions of divine love echoed the themes that Sir Aldrich had lived decades earlier. The ripples continued to spread, carried by individuals who might never have heard of the broken knight who encountered a fallen star in the thornwood, but who had somehow been touched by the same awakening consciousness that had transformed his life.
But his true legacy lived on in the lives he had touched, the consciousness he had awakened, the seeds of divine remembrance he had planted in countless hearts. In the years following his death, several manuscript copies appeared throughout England, anonymous writings that seemed to capture the essence of his teachings without explicitly naming their source. These texts spoke of the kingdom of heaven as a present reality, of Jesus as a teacher of humanity's divine potential, of God as the living consciousness that flowed through all existence. They were passed hand to hand among those ready to receive such truths, always carefully, always with the understanding that such knowledge carried both great power and great risk. One such manuscript found its way to a young scholar at Oxford named John Wycliffe, who would later challenge church authority in ways that anticipated the Protestant Reformation. Another influenced a mystic named Julian of Norwich, whose visions of divine love echoed themes that Sir Aldrich had lived decades earlier. The ripples continued to spread, carried by individuals who might never have heard of the broken knight who encountered a fallen star in the thornwood, but who had somehow been touched by the same awakening consciousness that had transformed his life.
And so we come to the end of this extraordinary tale, this legend that has been whispered through the centuries, hidden in the margins of forbidden texts, and passed down through secret lineages of mystics and seekers. Was Sir Aldrich de Montfort a real historical figure? Did a celestial being truly crash in the forests of medieval England? Did a broken knight really discover truths that challenged the very foundations of religious orthodoxy? These are questions that cannot be answered with historical certainty. But perhaps that is not the point. Perhaps the power of this story lies not in its factual accuracy, but in its ability to awaken something within us, something that recognizes truth regardless of the form in which it appears. Think about it. How many of us have felt like Sir Aldrich in his darkest moments? How many of us have looked at the suffering in our world and wondered where God is? How many of us have felt abandoned by the divine, left to struggle alone with questions that seem to have no answers? And yet, what if the being in this story was right? What if the kingdom of heaven truly is within us? What if the divine consciousness we seek in distant places is actually the very essence of our own being? What if Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, and all the great teachers throughout history were trying to point us toward the same fundamental truth, that we are not separate from the source of all existence, but expressions of it? This doesn't mean abandoning your faith tradition or rejecting the wisdom of religious institutions.
It means looking deeper, beneath the surface teachings, to the mystical core that connects all authentic spiritual paths. It means having the courage to experience the divine directly, rather than simply believing what others tell you about it. Sir Aldrich's transformation began with an act of compassion, helping a wounded being in need. It continued with openness to new possibilities and willingness to question old assumptions. It culminated in direct experience of the divine reality that mystics throughout history have tried to describe in words that always fall short of the lived truth.
What would happen if you approached your own spiritual journey with the same openness? What would happen if you looked for God not just in churches and scriptures, but in the faces of those who suffer, in moments of profound love, in the quiet depths of your own consciousness? I can't promise you'll encounter a fallen celestial being in your local forest, but I can promise you this: the same divine consciousness that allegedly spoke to Sir Aldrich is available to you right now, in this moment, as you listen to these words. It doesn't require special ceremonies or sacred locations or religious authorities to grant you access. It requires only willingness. Willingness to look within, to love without condition, to serve without expectation of reward. The legend of Sir Aldrich the Broken reminds us that transformation is always possible, that redemption can come from unexpected sources, and that the divine love we seek has never actually been absent. We've simply forgotten how to perceive it. So I challenge you, as this story challenged him. Look deeper than surface appearances. Question assumptions that no longer serve your spiritual growth. Open your heart to possibilities that transcend conventional religious boundaries. And most importantly, live as if the divine consciousness truly does flow through you. Because according to this ancient legend, it does. If this story has stirred something within you, if it has awakened questions you didn't know you had, or possibilities you didn't know existed, then do me a favor. Share it with someone else who might be ready to hear it. Subscribe to this channel for more tales that challenge conventional thinking and invite us to explore the deeper mysteries of existence. And please let me know in the comments below, what spiritual truths have you discovered that transcended traditional religious teachings? What moments in your own life have given you direct experience of the divine? How has your understanding of God or the sacred evolved over time? Remember, we're all on this journey together, all seekers trying to understand our place in the vast mystery of existence. Some of us find our answers in traditional religious practices. Others discover them in mystical experiences that can't be easily categorized. Others encounter the divine in acts of service, in moments of creative inspiration, in the depths of human love. The path doesn't matter as much as the destination. The remembering of our true nature as expressions of divine consciousness. The awakening to our fundamental interconnection with all existence. The discovery that the love we seek has never actually been separate from us.
May your own journey be filled with such discoveries. May you find the courage to question what needs questioning, and the wisdom to embrace what serves your highest good. And may you remember, in your own moments of darkness and doubt, that you are never truly alone,
because the same consciousness that moves the stars moves also through your own heart. The story of the night and the fallen star reminds us that sometimes the most profound truths come not from the authorities we expect, but from the strangers we help, the outcasts we welcome, the wounded beings we choose to heal rather than fear. In a world that often seems dark and divided, perhaps this is exactly the reminder we need, that divine light can fall from unexpected places, that celestial wisdom can come through alien messengers, and that the most heretical ideas might sometimes be the most deeply true. Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and keep your hearts open to the impossible possibilities that might just transform your understanding of everything you thought you knew about God, faith, and the magnificent mystery of existence itself. The legend continues with each of us who choose to live it.